All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to work. It's our last day. We made it. It's been a wonderful week. And we are going to finish up today with a presentation on the future of Dataverse by Stefano. And we are going to do some breakout sessions this afternoon. We have a few groups that we've identified for discussion. There's actually 5 groups, not 6. But throughout the week, we've talked about artificial intelligence, generative AI, and innovation in Dataverse. We've talked about national and international challenges for Dataverse. We've talked about large data support and Globus, sensitive data support and Dataverse, and we've also talked about sustaining community collaborations and engagements in Dataverse, GDCC, and the UX working group. So we're going to ask everybody to, pick a group, hopefully some even distributions, but please pick where, your area of expertise, and ask you to identify 5 challenges from this week's presentations and 5 possible solutions. And after the breakout, we'll regroup and have somebody from your group breakout session present that summary for us. And that is where we are today. We'll have some closing remarks from Craig Dreher and Jesus Herrera. And then you guys can do lunch and farewell. And hopefully everyone, if you're traveling, safe travels home. And if you're hanging around, enjoy your stay. So, Stefano, future of Dataverse.
So this type of Sunday album, I have never done.
Está saliendo un código fuera del page.
Es un micrófono abierto.
Okay. And so she asked me, or the community asked me to predict the future of Dataverse. So, not working. Okay, let me go back here. No, it's not working. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So I look into my crystal ball and I look for Dataverse. And now I'm going to reveal the future of Dataverse. Okay? You ready? Yeah. Okay. It can be scary. And this thing doesn't, okay. Can someone help me? There's something wrong with the...
You're there, but I think that's just an angle.
Okay, you can use the clicker.
Okay. Yeah, I reveal too much now. Okay. So, as the slide says, the present is already very packed. So this is from my first day introduction, plus all the work the community is doing. So why don't we enjoy the present? And avoid me to predict the future, which is kind of hard to do. So carpe diem, guys. But no, I have to do it. So first thing I want to say that yesterday we approached, after a long discussion internal to the DB core team members, we propose Eric. Where is Eric? Oh, that guy. to become a member of DV Core. So at first he said no. No, I'm joking. He said yes. And we are very happy because he is a very respected member of the community. He's contributing a lot. He has lots of ideas, especially in this phase of re-architecturing of the internals of Dataverse, not just the SPA, but also what happens in the background. So his expertise is very welcome. So thank you so much, Eric, for accepting. Okay, now. Okay, now real stuff. So in terms of the future, there are several things that are about the community itself. So Dataverse is not just Harvard, IQSS, it's you, it's the community. So first thing is that in the roadmap of the containerization working group, one of the first things that we hope will be completed very soon is the port into Kubernetes, because this will allow for many possibilities. Also, if you think about computing on the data, this is a good place to go. So now the Dockerized version does not really work out of the box there, but they are working on it. So I'm very happy that this working group is advanced very fast. Then Julian, and together with also the SPA team, they are pushing on the UX working group. So the idea is that they just started. So the idea, and it's very hard to, as you know, to put people together around a Zoom call and get something done. So they start working, and they would like to produce a first recommendation by the end of this year of how we can improve the user experience in Dataverse. Then the sustainability working group finally seems to have reached some sort of conclusion of some aspect of the sustainability of the future of the Dataverse project, as we discussed during this meeting. And the sustainability working group has its own roadmap. So the mandate that we gave last year at the last meeting was to produce something by the end of June. So by the end of June, there will be a report based on the It Takes a Village framework to understand the maturity of the Dataverse community and the Dataverse project. And then by the end of 2024, after reviewing what is on the plate, this group may probably be able to come up with some proposals on how to improve the sustainability or guarantee the sustainability of Dataverse. Then PyDataverse, that's another important thing for the global future, let's say, of Dataverse, because it, as we have seen yesterday, Jan's talk, it will allow to, when all the API endpoints have been included in the package, it will allow you to create high-level APIs, merge the two packages, and provide another way to interact with Dataverse as a backend. During the sustainability working group, we also discussed about the possibility of applying together Harvard and GDCC for special NSF grant, which is called POSE. Is for essentially, it works for open source projects, which are not yet mature, so it's kind of our case in some aspects. And so we will try to see what we can get. And then the announcement is that CIMMYT will finally be a member of GDCC, and we are very happy. Thank you so much for contributing. And then, as I said, this is, I stress a lot my team on this, because this is part of the sustainability, although it seems not so clear, but coming from our software experience, I know this is very fundamental to avoid any bottleneck in the deployment of new features of Dataverse. So this team, and now Eric will be part of this discussion, have to essentially describe to the community what does it mean to be a DB Core member, what are the privileges, what are the duties, and so forth. So this is coming. I hope this plays now. Okay. It doesn't play. Okay. It was nice, but on my computer. Maybe I can click somewhere. Okay, the winner is John. John, do you want to come? You want to come to say a few words? So I'm very happy for John, but I'm also very, I'd say, sympathetic with him, because this year the level of the community meeting has put the bar very, very high. I don't know how John can make it next year, so maybe you can say something.
So it's John. Get the other John here. So we're super, super excited about this. We've been thinking about hosting for a long time, but as you know, it is a complicated thing. That excitement for me personally is also tempered a bit by a little anxiousness, because our folks here at CIMMYT have really set the bar high, right? I mean, how do you beat the mariachi band, the piñata, and the pyramids? I mean, we've got as a host, they've really set the bar high, and they're great hosts. But the one thing I know is that this is a great community, and I said this at one of the meetings at Harvard, it's really more of a family, because everyone knows each other. We go from event to event together. We help each other. It is a great collaborative family, and we're so happy to be a part of that family. I do know one thing for sure. Our team at UNC always rises to a challenge. So we will do our best, I promise that. So I look forward to seeing every one of you in North Carolina.
Thank you, John. Now, we are really very, very happy that this is happening. So thank you, John, for committing to this, and the other John and all the other people. Okay, so next, so from the community to a continuation of activities, which are very important. So all I'm presenting here is it's mostly about the infrastructure. So to make it sustainable, modularized, and so forth. So of course we will continue with the SPA development. So here I linked the yesterday presentation from Ellen. There is a roadmap document for Q2. So now we are releasing the first beta version of the SPA. By June we will release a new version with some features which makes not just the look and feel, but also the functionalities of the SPA with respect to the current JSF a little bit different. And so as long as the user UX working group will go on, and as long as you participate with the SPA working group, it is possible to create a kind of a wish list of what you would like to see different from what now it is JSF implementation and what will be the SPA React version. Of course, with the SPA, there will come the JS Dataverse. So this is the JavaScript library, which is it's like PyDataverse. So it's the interface for JavaScript to talk to the backend, and the design system package if you want to create other type of SPAs. So it contains the elements for making your own SPA or modules of the pages of the SPA. Then we need to move this proof of concept, so computing on the data, to production. We will abstract the concept so that every installation can use their own HPC infrastructure to do exactly what I show you. And we have seen that other installations, they are already somehow doing this. Then we need to come up with a vision. This is mostly for Harvard for the moment, but as I said in my talk, I want to make it more general. So I want to remove all the Harvard logos here and make it more general in the sense that I want to see Dataverse not just as a data repository. It should fit all the cycle of the research data. And then we need to finalize the OIDC authentication support. We had a nice talk by Jim on how this is already possible in some other implementation, and we will need this for the SPA and for others, also for the computing part. And so in terms of AI, we talk a lot about AI, so we want to extend the number of applications on top of Dataverse. I mean, not just us, but I guess the community will do this. Ourselves, we would like to fine-tune an LLM using all the information we have already from curated data in Dataverse and possibly the Dataverse, say, network to generate automatic metadata fields, let's say, but from a very curated training set. This is something that not everyone can do. So we as a community, we can do this. We want to extend this as the data concept to more complex interactions. So like making Dataverse a more living platform. And of course, going into production with different types of research engine. So for us, IQSS will be embedded, but I would like also to be able to include the things that Slava is doing on a more general way. So on the NIH GRI, which is one of our main founders for the moment, there are a few things I want to highlight. So we will focus on supporting even better AutoCrate. There has been a lot of discussion here, connecting digital objects, and also try to, from the qualitative analysis of how we can do QA and quality control on data, how potentially create automatic tools which allows the curators to do the job or simplify the job. Then there are additional development goals that we have internally. Some of them are within the different grants, but anyway. So we want to extend the support for variable level metadata. We already have something, you know, but we want to go a step further. And this morning, Slava told me that he will be able to, he is authorized, of course he is able, but he is authorized to work on the cross-ML exporter, which is now probably very soon become the standard for distributing data for machine learning and AI, say, workflows. So we will have this. And we are talking with Codata so that I think if the collaboration starts, it will be very beneficial to this one in terms of how we implement stuff. So we want to expand also data types to support generic research objects. So this is a request which comes from the community, but there is also an internal need for it now. And so we want to push more on this type of object. So data types is the way you describe what's in a data set. And so we would like to support code, software, workflows, but also samples and instruments like we have seen in the IGSN ID talk. And I appreciate that our space is willing to remove the burden of managing this part in the relationship between Dataverse and our space. But I think Dataverse should support natively also these kind of identifiers. Then we want to extend the support for geometadata. The CAFE project has already considered this problem, so it's part of the grant. And there is also a working group, so we are now trying to connect these two entities together. And then, as Gustavo mentioned, we want to extend the search to multiple, say, pluggable search engines. So you can attach anything to the search field of the Dataverse homepage so that you can actually use your own engine for specialized things. Okay, so collaboration after this meeting. Please attend the monthly community meetings call, the working groups if of your interest, Slack channel, Zulip. I have to subscribe to Zulip, I didn't yet. Apparently it's very nice. And you are very welcome to participate. And this is what makes the path for a good future for Dataverse, so being together as a community. Also, we are open to, as you know, for joint application for new grants. So Harvard and whatever other installation. We are doing this with Dataverse NO and other installations. So whenever you find an opportunity for a joint grant application, please drop me a line or to Sonia or to Kaylin, and we will try to go on. So that's it. Thank you so much. See you on Zoom or at the next community meeting in Chapel Hill. Thank you for being here.
So, we have breakout rooms. the schedule. Somebody can help with the rooms that people are going to. So again, I mean, I feel like we have a small enough team that people can meet here, but I think the other rooms are fine, yeah. So we have 5 groups, again. Who's interested in the artificial intelligence, generative AI, and innovation in Dataverse? We have 1 group for the first group, AI. Yep. Yep, so you have, then you have the national and international challenges for Dataverse, large data support in Globus, sensitive data support in Dataverse, and then there's a combination of sustainability, community collaborations, and engagement, GDCC, and the UX Working Group initiative. Okay, so artificial intelligence, you're in TR 10, room 10. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it's all in this building, it's just in the hallway, down the hallway in the lobby there. National and international challenges for Dataverse, 11A. Now remember, you're identifying 5 challenges and possible solutions, 30 minutes, come back, 1 person report. So the national and international challenges, that's 11A. Large data support is 11B. Yeah, that's what I mean, it's part of this group, the sustainability, yes. Sensitive data support, room 12. Sustaining community, GDCC, UX working group, VC09. Can you, somebody tell them what VC09 is? I don't know what that is. In front of 10 is VC09 for sustaining community collaborations, GDCC, UX working group. So artificial intelligence, number 10, national international challenges, 11A, large data support, 11B, sensitive data support, 12, sustainability, engagement, GDCC, VC09. You want to take this with you in case anybody out there is lost? It's all in the same area. 30 minutes, so let's plan for you guys to be back here by 10:30 with a summary. All right, 10:35, 10:40. We can't plug in the laptops because we have attendees online, and so they have to be able to see our conversation. So the artificial intelligence group, there's somebody in it. All right, they're not here. Sustainability, maybe? Let's start with sustainability. And I will ask that you guys just send your reports to me, your notes on email after. So sustainability group is up. Oh, no, they can't.
Okay, so we kind of had 2 scopes because it was also the UX group, and yeah, there's a bit of overlap anyway. Maybe I first wanted to mention that there is a flyer outside on the registration desk on some of the initial outcomes from the sustainability working group, so if you're interested in that, go have a look. Some of the questions that we discussed when it comes to sustainability, a question was, why are institutions choosing not to use Dataverse and going for own development or commercial options? And we sort of wondered if there was an option to do a survey or research into non-Dataverse users and why they don't choose or use Dataverse. Another question was, what would happen if there was a global Dataverse support setup for institutions that you can buy services from? The questions that came from that was, who is willing to do this, to provide this consultancy, and that organization that would be in place to provide that service should have a very close connection to other organizations, like, for example, DataCite, and they should practice some quality control on best and supported practices on Dataverse to, I think we called it to avoid supporting Dataverse abuse, we called it, but that might be wording it a bit strongly. But this is something that is picked up in the working group as well. Then we was also kind of curious, like what are the existing use cases for Dataverse currently that are out there, that are kind of outside of the scope and the standard use case of an open data repository. Again, is there some research or survey into that that would be interesting? And I think the other points were more focused on UX. So a question we had was like, what will be the scope of the UX working group? Because it intertwines with so many other topics that it's kind of difficult to see where to go from there. Then we also had a question, how do you ensure that the UX with the SPA setup remains similar across different looking UIs? And then what made me think about the workflow of how you use Dataverse. The look can be different, but the steps and the logic behind it, we thought should probably be somewhat similar to keep the UX similar. We also were talking about how to perhaps decouple some of the UX impact from technical limitations. For example, possibly avoid making implementations that make the UX illogical for non-Dataverse experts. And we were mainly talking about the file upload. So currently, if you want to use the DV web uploader or the Globus setup, you need to first create a draft, and then you can go to edit files, and then you can suddenly see the option to upload a folder or use the Globus connector, which to us makes sense because we realize there needs to be a draft before we can use this, but to the end user, it's not understandable, so maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense. And for example, in that situation, splitting up the metadata entry as a first step and a second step after having saved the metadata being the file upload step being an option. But that was just an example of sort of something that the UX working group could possibly focus on, to always keep an eye on those end users and the logic that they see behind the system. Then our last point, I think, was one that we talked about a lot, and that we also thought was very usable for most people who are not the technical support at the Dataverse installations. And that was the issue that documentation can be quite difficult for end users to find the relevant information in, because you need to know the terminology that is used in the documentation to find certain things. And it's also just a lot. Like, you get information on everything when maybe you just need a little bit. When we were talking about the terminology that you kind of need to know to find things, I think the example was when you want to find information about converting in Excel, you need to know that you have to look for tabular ingest. It's like an example of it. We did mention that the current documentation works really well as technical documentation, as it's very complete, but it can be very intimidating and overwhelming for first-time end users. And we were sort of wondering if there is a need for an extra user-friendly manual, sort of a startup guide that is focused on just the basic first-time end user. And Vida was part of the breakout session, and she said that, for example, for our spaces, they are using helpdocs.io, so I put it in there too. And also kind of keeping in mind that with that startup guide, that you have a couple of options. For example, what if someone has a review phase, that you include the review flow, but if they don't, that entire part gets skipped. And I think it was mentioned that maybe this work on documentation and sort of figuring out what the pain points are for the end users there could be a nice starting point for the UX working group. So yeah, that was what we discussed. Thank you.
All right, can folks hear me? Yes, thumbs up? Okay, great. So we bundled our challenges and solutions into 3 categories: technical, curation, and then administration policy best practices. And so those were the challenges, but I'm going to give you a preview of the solutions. The solutions really were communicate and collaborate. So under technical challenges, we came up with 3. Actually, we came up with 9 total, okay? So 3. The first challenge, granular access control models for large data. That includes embargoes, sensitive data, et cetera. 2 solutions there. 1, investigate technical options and or collaborate with Globus to ensure support, and then also potentially investigate IRODs. And then the second solution is to actually go ahead and do the comparison between IRODs, S3, Globus, et cetera, and share out those results, kind of communicate, right? Next challenge, computing on the data. So the solution here, investigate options for different site infrastructures, and then share out our results with the community to see if we can find any points of commonality and any efficiencies. In addition, there's the option to investigate cloud computing options, because many of our use cases may involve that. And then the third challenge, supporting data download and reuse for our users. Once you get the big data up there or wherever it is, how do you get it to the users? Solution there was to explore alternative download options like torrents, and then be cognizant of security challenges. Next, curation challenges. First challenge here is the diversity of use cases, which also, of course, overlaps, intersects with our technical challenges. The solution there, we felt, was to create a library of community use cases to help inform technical solutions and partnerships and help identify feasibility. So folks will know right up front if a use case really isn't going to be feasible for their particular set of infrastructures. Next challenge, diversity of large data and compute infrastructures that are available to all of our community. The solution there, we felt, was to document categories of infrastructures and then, of course, share that out. So if any other new members come along confronting these challenges, they can kind of find their path through prior experience. Then the third challenge, managing rarely used data and handling data retention. So in this case, we have two potential solutions. Investigating hybrid technical curation options for data storage and access for rarely used data, and then also collaborating with other groups such as RDA that are investigating data retention challenges. Now finally, onto our third bucket, which is the administration policy and best practices. Our first challenge, finding qualified people with the necessary large data support, technical as well as curation skills. So we weren't quite sure really there. There's a couple of options. One is to develop those skills in-house. One is to locate qualified talent elsewhere. But then, of course, we come back to the community. Whatever we find out, whatever we do, we should share back with everyone who's facing these challenges in the Dataverse community. Next was pricing and billing. How do we handle this, right? Pricing for Globus, pricing for other kinds of infrastructures. Two, our recommendation was for installations to investigate partnerships with local providers and form alliances. And then, of course, hopefully share that out. Perhaps there's some more global network-wide options that we can think through. And then finally, information sharing about large data use cases. This is our next challenge. We all have all these use cases. We know there's lots of them out there, very complicated. What do we do? So our solution there is we should really formalize this large data working group. We've kind of been a little bit more ad hoc. So let's formalize it. Let's all come together and identify kind of some objectives and then start to share out some codified work to the community. So that's it.
Okay, and was anybody in the artificial intelligence? Sorry? Yep, thank you.
This is a little daunting because the last one was super organized and this one's not. And so if I think this up or forget anything, you guys correct me. I tried to break this down into 5 topics. It's more like a narrative of sort of what we discussed. We started out looking at challenges around what I think of as data integration. How do you find all the data sets that are mergeable on a given topic? And how can AI help basically understanding like where things are actually equivalent and possible points for doing joins so that you can combine data from different sources. Not so much looking at individual data sets, but looking across large collections and finding out where's the data that you could draw on and use together. That was sort of the first topic. And we think that some of the approaches that were presented here around the search would actually be applicable in that scenario. Also, that it might be possible to leverage things like mappings, like crosswalks, that exist if they're published in a form that they can be accessed. And those could be generated by AI, they could be leveraged by AI. And there are some places where that kind of metadata is being made available. So that was sort of one discussion. The second one was more about connecting data with publications and other related things that are maybe more textual. There's a lot of information about data in the publications that's not directly connected, and yet there's a lot of value there. How could you create something like a knowledge graph that would allow you to navigate those connections and know more about the data that you were dealing with? That's maybe not the best summary of that discussion, but that was one. AI is really good at dealing with textual things. A lot of our metadata is structured, but not rich in the way that the publications are. So how do we bridge that combination? The next thing was there was quite a bit of discussion about training sets and how a lot of aspects of that. On one hand, how do we expose the metadata within Dataverse to better be consumed in training sets so that you're optimizing the data holdings and what you know about the data for that. And there are things like Croissant and a lot of this is happening at the variable level. So you're looking at fine-grained metadata. There was also a discussion about the costs of dealing with training sets and the refinement of models. I don't want to go into the niceties of that, but you guys were having, Slava and Stefano were starting to have quite an interesting discussion about that, but that was obviously not finished in the time frame. But it's pretty clear that looking at the training sets and how we deal with those is an interesting topic that could be pursued further. There was some discussion, I'm going to mess this up, it was this gentleman back here who raised it, but there's this idea of compliance in the US now, where people are required to deposit data after the findings are published and so on, and yet there's very little visibility into the connections, again, between what's required and then what's actually done after the fact. There's an idea of sort of executable data management plans that's a big deal in the US right now. How could AI better facilitate understanding, did people actually do what they say they were going to do and what they're required to do? Some discussion about culpability in terms of disclosure risk. And I guess this is a related topic in my mind. Can we create better models using AI of assessing disclosure risk? How do you use AI to say, oh, this, if we do the following things to the data, then it is safe to publish? And that's a very scary field, I think, because AI is really powerful, and it's very hard to make sure that de-anonymization is not going to cut it anymore in a lot of cases. And so how does AI potentially impact that? And I don't think we had a solution for that because we got cut off in the middle of that discussion. But there's pretty clearly an application there. So did I forget anything, you guys? Is that a fair summary of the discussion? Okay.
Please, again, whoever has the notes, send it to my email because we have to collect them. Eric, I'll just send you a reminder email.
Can I just take a picture of it?
However you want to send it to me, I'll attach you on email, that's fine. Thanks. Yeah, that's right, okay. National and international challenges, did we have, yep, great, wonderful.
Nice, powerful computer, terrible to travel with. Okay, so the national internationalization, or international group, sorry. International group was basically myself and Dimitri. We have solved all the problems. You're welcome. So we've identified 5 challenges. I'll just go challenge and some of the solutions. Some of the solutions are already things we're doing. We just need to be maybe a little bit more aware of some of them. The first one was the need, in no order, the need for harmonization while also taking into account specific contexts, whether it's national, local, regional issues, whether it's best practices or curation. People in places will do things differently. One of the biggest solutions is having a community like this one does help with the challenges. Whether we have an international community like this or even national or local communities where people can talk is a good start. This, in combination with regular communications and a greater understanding of our users, what they need, what they understand of the platform. I know someone before mentioned terminology. Any field is really good at having terminology that is meaningless to users. I come from archives and libraries talk about discovery tools. It's just a catalog for people, and I don't care if there's a difference between the two. A user will just use one term, not the other. So instead of correcting users and telling them this is a terminology, maybe we should reflect that in what the tools we're doing. So a need for better harmonization. The second one, unsurprising if you know me, language issues. So that can be reflected in the documentation, in the UX, in various meetings. There is, a common agreement that English is a de facto language of science, which is perfectly fine. Latin was at a point. But the local communities don't necessarily understand English or use it daily. It could be a second, third, fourth, fifth language for some people. And certainly for our students in our universities, English is not always a language they master. Certainly not reading at the university level. So continuing with more translations and internationalization of the software and the platform, but also coordinating these efforts. I was looking yesterday at the GDCC repository, and there's obviously 2 versions of French for Canada and France. There's 2 for Portugal with Portuguese and Brazilian. There's 2 versions of German with Austria and Germany. And there's probably many other examples like this. But we need more languages reflected so that our local communities can actually use the platform without focusing on understanding what it says, but rather focusing on fixing other problems. There's that mental load that actually gets solved in there. The third point was the consistency of interactions with national and regional and international partners. So having an organization like GDCC that pushes for contributions, having Zoom meetings, having annual meetings, all of that, it's a bit tied to the first challenge, but all of this is something I think need to continue doing. It does help, and we can actually all bring that back to our institutions and pass it on to I am the RDN specialist at my institution, but pass that on to other people that can then pass it on to the community of researchers. The fourth point is having different governance, which that is a nightmare. Having different governance model, different legislation at the international, national, regional, state, provincial, territorial, call them what you want levels, sometimes municipal levels, is something that is very difficult to deal with. Involving a legal consultant, if you're at an institution where there is a legal consultant or legal services, involve them in your decisions. Supranational legislation like GDPR is something that we are seeing and affects all of us. Sometimes within a country, there are going to be states or provinces that have specific legislation that affects the rest of the platform, so you need to be aware of this. And also understanding the legal responsibilities. So if you, like Borealis operates in Canada, we do have to operate within 10 or 11 different legal frameworks. If you had an equivalent in the US, it would have to work in 50 different states with 50 different legislations and so on. So that's something to think about. Similar to the European Union. And the last one is logistics, which sounds a bit trivial, but things like travel, meetings, and grants. Having this meeting occur in different places around the world will help bring people. I mean, again, this was the first time, and I think it's much needed to have this in the doors of Latin America. I'm not saying that Mexico, you're not Latin American, but it's the doors of Latin America to go to South America, for example. Having this in Europe, in Eastern Europe, having this in Asia would also help bring those communities, which again brings different logistical challenges. Scheduling meetings. This is an example we've been given at Borealis in Canada. We have 5.5 time zones to deal with. So we schedule the meetings at 1 p.m. Eastern time so that people that work in British Columbia don't have to get up at 6 o'clock. They can start their day at 9. People in Newfoundland can join in at 2:30 in the afternoon. If you have an international meeting in Europe and you schedule it at 9, some of us in North America will have to get up at 2 or 3 a.m. or vice versa. If we schedule something in North America at 5 p.m., people in Europe will be in the middle of the night, so be mindful of this. Same thing for travels. This is one of the issues we wanted to raise. Considering the travel costs, visa and travel restrictions, sometimes we choose a place for a conference that has political impacts for some people. This is something we see a lot in Canada with our students. We have students from Iran, from Colombia, and they're often prevented from working with professors because that professor also holds US funding. So that's an issue to consider. And also documenting and recording meetings. It might sound trivial, but if you can't attend a meeting because it's either too early or too late in the day, you can follow and watch the recording later, or at least read the notes. Just making sure I'm not forgetting anything. And grants, someone mentioned this morning the issue of grants. We all know how difficult it is to write a grant when there's multiple international partners, but we're all kind of experts in doing this because we work in a field that understands how to do this better than the private sector or the health sector, for example. So we should push towards issues to fix this. Did I forget anything, Dimitri? No, good. Thank you.
Okay, and sensitive data?
Smaller computer. Okay, yeah. Okay, the report from the sensitive data group. There were 3 of us. Dans represented Borealis and the Barcelona Computing Center. 2 of us are actually new to the sensitive data group and also slightly new to Dataverse. So we started with a little bit of free-floating discussion on the situation in our respective institutes and the questions that we had. For example, issues about responsibility, whether it's at the repository side or at the depositor side. I explained something about the liability case that we had at DANS. You know, as an academy, we cannot be sued for damage in the data, so we had to put the responsibility completely on the side of the depositors, and that's now also captured in our statements and agreements. So addressing things like the different rules and regulations in continents and countries, GDPR, what's going on in Spain, what's going on in Canada. I also had a kind of free-floating discussion on what do we actually mean with secure storage requirements in terms of standards, in terms of liability, in terms of locality, something to that can differ quite a lot per case and per country. Issues we addressed when storing secure data take care of issues, for example, with medical data that really need to be stored for a very long term, like 20 years, 25 years. So we're talking about serious storage periods, and you do need real capacities, and also take this into account when establishing your agreements and establishing the governance around your storage of sensitive data. We also discussed slightly the interaction with different health infrastructures in our countries and domains. For example, I also explained this when I was presenting the data station, the European Health Data Space. There's a large infrastructure in the making, and as a repository storing sensitive data, we need to take in mind how we are going to interact with those larger infrastructures later on. And well, out of all that issues in the discussion, we boiled down 5 issues that we think are suggestions or recommendations to the community, so to say. So, and that first of all, develop very clear, open guidelines for researchers that we can actually share amongst each other on how to deal with sensitive data. Another very practical and easy to achieve goal would be to create a clear overview of tools that you can actually use when handling sensitive data. For example, tools to anonymize your data or to create pseudonymized data. There are some tools around. We should clearly provide our kind of recommendations from the Dataverse community on which tool to use. I think it's an easy to achieve goal and something that we actually can quite easily work on and establish at some point in the very near future. Another issue is a Dataverse administrator guide for sensitive data storage and requirements, something that is needed. There were some examples from, for example, Borealis is working on a report about security gap analysis for Dataverse using NIST, which is a standard I'm not completely familiar with, but that's something that's already in use. Also very interesting, I think, the fourth point that we came across is having this discussion whether Dataverse should be used for metadata only around sensitive data sets. I think a lot of the users will have to deal with this. We very often are being approached by hospitals, can we just publish your metadata because the data itself are so sensitive that we don't want those data to leave the premises of our hospital. So, but of course, that's a discussion. I mean, we are a repository for data. We are not a metadata catalog. So, and I think this requires more discussion amongst the larger Dataverse community. And of course, a last point, more documentation and information about linking to the already existing remote storage possibility and best practices. We have seen the demonstration of Globis. Does that fit secure sensitive data, for example? So that's something we also can quite easily achieve, we think, in the near future.
Right. I actually had one addition to that. I don't think you mentioned it, but indigenous data is also considered sensitive data, and we already have ongoing projects to support that. So I think that's something to add to that list.
Yeah, I have to say, sensitive data. I think we basically focus on medical data, but obviously it's much more than that.
Yeah.
We also addressed IP issues or in industries, issues of ownership rights or patent information is of course also sensitive data, but yeah.
Yeah, so just in particular, if you could add that to the notes, I wasn't able to sit in any of the meetings.
We will. No, by all means.
We have an initiative already for today label support that we'd really like to get going, at least on the Harvard Dataverse first, because we need to see people using it or giving us feedback. We need the indigenous community, whoever's going to use this, give us feedback on it. So that's just another, really particular piece of the sense.
We'll add it to the
And one of the things you just mentioned is we actually have some data sets on Harvard Dataverse. For example, the social science data one. There's only metadata in there because the data are not, they're in a trusted remote storage and you have to go through an access process. But that's, in the Harvard Dataverse, we only support certain instances of those. They have to get permission to do that. But since it's from Gary King's project, of course we have it. But we have examples, of course. We have examples of that because it absolutely is a route that we have to take.
Yeah, and also I think I mentioned it when I'm presenting my data station, related to, for example, your certification issue. I mean, if you guarantee the users a long-term access to a complete data set and part of it is somewhere else on a server in the hospital, then, so yeah, and anyway, it's a rather complex issue for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful updates. And I think, and Cisa, I've already emailed you to send me those notes, just so you know. Okay, and so now we've done the breakouts. We have the notes to push out some more work. And on our agenda now are the closing remarks. Dr. Jesus Herrera and Kate Dreher. Dr. Kate Dreher. Well, see, there's something behind how I announced it. It's it's an inside thing. Yeah, inside.
Hello. So it seems that finally somebody from CIMMYT is going to do a presentation in this meeting. Hello, everyone. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you to all of you, and I'd also like to thank Richard Fultz for giving Jesus and me the opportunity to address you today in these closing remarks, our brief closing remarks. And to start, we'd just like to thank all of you again for coming here this week, coming down, coming up, coming over from all over the world to help remind ourselves and celebrate how much we love data, and we love the Dataverse Project, and we love the Dataverse community. And we have an exciting future to look forward to while we remember and celebrate our past successes. And I think that during this meeting, we'd also like to thank our keynote speakers for helping to remind us that I think we're all excited about data, but I think that a real motivation for all of us is that we hope that the data that we're trying to put into the public sphere to make available to people will really have a positive impact in the world. And so I thank Dr. O'Day and Dr. Snap for helping to remind us about that. And I think that one manifestation of that goal of making data available for impact was that there was a parallel workshop that was happening this week on data-driven systems for sustainable agri-food systems, and I was actually in most of those sessions. So I didn't get to attend many of the sessions here, but I was happy to be there because I knew that our wonderful CIMMYT colleagues were all here learning about the new exciting advances that everyone is making in Dataverse so that we can help make that data available for impact. And while we were thinking about this last week and the last decade, these 10 years of community meetings also help to remind us of 10 years that we've been working with Dataverse at CIMMYT. And as some of you may know, we're part of the CGIAR, and at CIMMYT, we have a mandate to make data available to the public. And having a mandate is very important, but having champions to motivate and support that mandate is also very important. And so we'd like to acknowledge that part of the impetus for us moving forward with making data available through the public came from our Deputy Director of Research, Deputy Director General of Research, Dr. Marianne Banziger, who always wanted us to make sure that we were helping to make data available to the public. And also one of the motivations for sort of our first use of Dataverse came from a project that was the Mass Agro Project and Seeds of Discovery Initiative. And one of the key scientists involved in that was Dr. Sarah Hearn, and that project was involved in trying to generate data about materials in the germplasm bank. So hopefully many of you got to see those materials. It's a collection that is available to the world. And we also wanted to make sure that the data about that collection were available freely to the world. And so part of our initial collaboration was to make the data from this initiative available to the public. And so I went back to my virtual Wayback Machine, which is really just a folder in my computer that has a presentation from 2015, where we could see an example of some of the first data sets that we made available in this view of Dataverse, what it looked like back in 2014 when we were first starting to share this important data and these important files with the public. And I'd like to turn it over to Jesus to talk about how we have progressed with the help of Dataverse since then.
Yeah, this is a lesson of archaeology. Do you like it? This is our first Dataverse. Well, this is the oldest snapshot I could find on the internet to show you how our Dataverse version 3 was at the time, the same than in 2014 when it was created. It took us a while to move to version 4 because why? Gustavo, do you remember? Correct. He was a young man, but still remembers. So things have changed over a whole decade, and this is version, what version, Gustavo? Yeah? Oh, he's getting older. It has been a whole decade, 5.10.1. So yeah, it seems that we have been working for many years now. The baby has evolved. The baby already goes to university, I would say. And it's becoming more and more expensive to maintain. So it's not only the baby, but what it has inside it. And I mean, we wanted to show you this, this slide because, I mean, you can see here how the number of data sets archived in our Dataverse evolved from December 2014, 8 data sets, to March 2024, almost a decade, 1,000 data sets. That, for us, means that our scientists are committed to share their data. That's very important. And downloads. What means this good evolution of the downloads from our repository? Somebody can tell us? There's an increased interest in our data sets all over the world. It was an easy one. What CIMMYT has done within this community for along these years has been simple things like Gustavo mentioned before, the development of some pieces of code, especially to re-implement the support to handle. And we have been participating in the last 9 community meetings, especially in this one. I am tired, very tired today. Are you tired? Who's tired in the room? Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. No, I know that you you will survive, every one of us. Bad news for the rest, sorry. So this is basically what we have been done with the community and what happened here in Magic Texcoco these days. We have 89 participants on site, 3 of them granted by ORFG, 48 participants online, and 70 sessions, including presentations, meetings, and workshops. You should know all of this by now. But the most interesting part is this one. We have worked a lot, some interesting phases, I would say, but we have enjoyed a lot as well. So the game is over. I would like to think that you all had a really good time here in CIMMYT with us. It was a pleasure for us to organize this event together with the IQSS team along many, many weeks. It was tiring, but look at the result. Look at these faces. Look at this sun. Thank you so much, and see you in the next community meeting.